Hello and welcome. My name is Steve Eastman. I am actually the brother of Lori Buchanan, and I'm a mental health therapist in Utah County, so a little bit ways away from where you live. Lori asked me to maybe spend a few minutes with you and go over a few ideas about mental health, especially in these times when things are as weird as they are, and our mental health is pretty tried and tested to the extreme in many cases. People have had to go through a lot of challenging things. And so, reaching her invitation, I decided to put together a video that would show you some things, since I can't be with you. In fact, I actually do have right now COVID, so I'm very isolated, which makes me all the happier to be able to speak with you, even if it is remotely this way. I want to talk with you about some principles and some techniques that you can use in your own personal life, in your family, in your work, that really do make a difference. As a therapist, I meet with people every day to go over some of these principles and to discuss ways that they can make their lives happier by understanding these ideas and then by implementing the tools that we'll also talk about. So in the next few minutes, we'll spend anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes just talking about some things that you can do and some ways that you can think a little bit differently. I'm reminded of a continuing education seminar I went to some years back, in which the psychologist speaking said something that I have never forgotten. And when you're there for a whole day, you usually don't remember all of it. There's no way to remember everything that you hear. In this case, there was one thing in particular that stood out the most. She said, most people are experts in what they don't want. Now, when you think about that concept, there's a whole lot of power, of course, in focusing on things that we do want, but there's a whole lot of negative power in focusing so much on things that we don't want. And that's what we tend to do way too much, especially when things get overly negative. It's very easy to focus on those negative things. Think about it this way. You don't wake up in the morning saying to yourself, my knee feels so normal today. I mean, we don't pay attention to things that don't hurt. We do pay attention to things that do. You'd notice it if your knee was really hurting all of a sudden if you woke up in the morning. But we don't roll out of bed when it's not hurting at all and pay attention to the lack of pain. So we do have a tendency to be hardwired for negative and not at all wired to notice the positive. We don't tend, as a rule, until we teach ourselves to do so, to express gratitude for things. It's just sort of a survival mechanism to notice the things that are out of line, that are painful, that are frustrating or denigrating or whatever else it may be. So I want to help us to learn how to focus a little differently, or we will just become experts in what we don't want. If you want to be an airline pilot, don't go study all the manuals for garbage collecting, because you won't learn how to be an airline pilot that way. Don't focus on what you don't want to be so that you can become something that you do. In life, what happens with that is we have lots of negative things from day to day that might happen, that if we get hyper-focused on them and spend all of our time complaining or ruminating or perseverating about them, then we never have enough time to focus on the things we want to accomplish. So as you've set your New Year's resolution for this year, my hope is that you have set them in ways that are lining yourselves up for regular, consistent reviewing of those goals and self-evaluation in positive ways to look at ways that you are improving. We're talking about progress, not perfection. So we just want to see little steps that move in the right direction and not getting hung up on times when we fall short on a goal, but rather looking at ways that maybe we can improve a little bit better. So one of the things I love about President Gordon B. Hinckley was that he was always talking that way. He would say things like, at the end of a whole conference of all these talks of things we could do better, he'd say, let's go home and think of just a couple things we could do a little bit better. So as we look at this principle of making sure that we're focusing on things that are positive, I want to talk for a minute about perspective. It's all about perspective, the way that we take things in, the way that we interpret things. And if we do tend to focus on the negative, then we're going to see what is negative. If you remember those I Spy books, some of you still have little kids. My youngest is 15, so she and I don't really read a lot of those anymore, but you might have some little kids or remember what it's like to sit down and read those I Spy books, and it'll tell you, find a picture of the monkey. And you look in that pile of toys or whatever that are there in the picture, and search through all of them until you find the monkey. Then you go down to the next thing and it says, find a fire engine. And you say, there's a fire engine? And then you look up and it's massive, this big, huge fire engine in the middle that you didn't see before. Well, why didn't you see it? It's not because it wasn't there. It's because that's not what you were looking for. We see what we look for, and that's the concept I'm talking about in terms of perspective. If we're looking for negative, we're going to find it. And then we're going to be depressed about it, or frustrated, or angry, or disheartened, or scared. But if we're looking for the positive, the healthy, the good, not that we turn a blind eye to the things that are real and that are negative and that need attention or to be dealt with, but rather that we also incorporate in that vision the rest of what's there, that's where we can start making some progress. So I'll give you an example of this. It's a little funner if I'm there with you, but I can't be right now. So we'll just do this by video. I'm going to hold up this piece of paper, and I want you to tell me, or tell yourself really, because I'm not there, but what color you see. So I hold this up to you. Now, if you were to ask me what I see, I would tell you that I see a blue paper. When I look at it, I see a blue paper. When I've done this with clients, they tell me it's red. So I would ask you what color that you are seeing. And you probably would say red because that's what most people tell me. Well, if I tell you that I think that it's blue, then what would you say to that? I've had clients tell me, well, you're probably colorblind. Okay, well, maybe that's the case. So how would you help me see that it really is red? And they'll say things like, well, look around the room and point to that thing over there that's red. That's red. Do you agree with that, Steve? And I'll say, yeah, that's red. But this is blue. And then they're a little more confused or frustrated, so I'll say to them, well, okay, so if I'm going to just keep saying it's blue, what do you think about me? And they're like, well, whatever. If you want to say it's blue, whatever, but it's really red. Well, at the end of this discussion, I'll say to them, so you're really positive that's red and that there's probably something wrong with the way I'm seeing it. And they say, yes, it's red. I graduated from kindergarten. I know my colors. Well, here's the rest of the story. My side of the paper is blue. Now that, when I'm looking at it, okay, now I see red. But you're now seeing blue. So the real answer to the question, is it red or is it blue? The answer is what? Yes, it is both colors. It is red and it's blue, depending on our perspective. It'd be nice if Congress could get that principle down. But anyway, what I want to look at is how to actually move forward with that. In a conversation with someone where maybe we have a difference of opinion, so this is often fun to do with marriage counseling, it requires a little bit of taking that stance of, okay, I'm seeing red, but help me see why you see it's blue. Instead of what we usually do, which is like, you're colorblind. I'm right, you're colorblind. It's red, no other color exists here. In a real marriage, that doesn't work. It must be, okay, I see red, but I've got to talk to you to see why you're seeing blue. I need to understand that. If enough questions are asked and enough curiosity is explored, then the answer would finally come up. If you and I with this red-blue paper did that long enough, would figure it out without even turning it around, that the other side was a different color. Now let's look at kind of why perspective does this. And I am giving you a fire hydrant's view, spewage of mental health principles today, but I hope you'll be able to take it and use it. And they're all related. I wrote these down to begin with. But related to perception and the concept of how you see colors comes to some stuff that is a very important aspect of our mental health, and I want to make sure we understand that, how perspective even gets created in the first place. So think about it this way. I've got my whiteboard here that I can draw some things up on the board. I'm pretty visual, so I hope this is helpful to you. I want to explain how perspective develops, how it operates from day to day, and also how it's related with how we feel. So here's a problem. Psychologists tell us that we are really only conscious of our thinking about 45% of the day. Well, when I heard that statistic, I got frustrated because that means I'm not even aware of my thoughts more than half the day. And that I didn't like that, but that's really how it is. Give or take a percentage depending on the person. But that's pretty much how that works. So if you're not consciously creating your thoughts the rest of the time, because, I mean, let's face it, there's never a time when you're not thinking, unless you're Jim, then, but that's a whole other story. You're never like in nowhere land thinking nothing. There's always something coming into your head from somewhere. And I guess the question is, where does it come from if you're not putting it there? And it's not aliens, I can tell you that right out of the gate. But then where is it? So let's look at this. I want you to think for yourself. I'll walk you through a scenario on the board. But think for yourself about some situation that's happened that resulted in negative emotions for you. I'll put one on the board here. Some situation and the resulting emotions that come from that. So it could be a situation as simple as getting pulled over by a police officer. If you're a teenager, it could be like you get a bad grade on a test, anything like that. We'll put up something I come across a lot, which is got in an argument with my spouse. So if that's happening, I come across this a lot in counseling where arguments occur, then that's where differences of perspectives really choke on each other. So the resulting emotions can vary, but usually it's something like there's anger, there's frustration, might even be a little bit of confusion, and typically you get some hurt feelings as well, these kinds of emotions. And we'll just make it an inexhaustive list because that's just the truth. So if we're looking at that, you're looking at how the argument actually is related to all these emotions. I'd ask you this question. Is it safe to say that that situation caused those emotions? I want you to think about that with whatever you, maybe on a piece of paper in front of you, you've written this down. Did the situation that you felt some negative emotion in actually cause those emotions? Most people to that question would say yes. Well, I would agree that it's not hard to see that these things are related. But it's important to note that it is not cause-effect. This situation actually does not ever cause those emotions. It goes situation, something else that Steve left a big blank space for, and then emotions. And this won't be lost on you. You're all going to understand it, but it is actually our thoughts and another thing we call beliefs, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. What we think about that situation, that is what comes around and ultimately causes the emotions. Not the situation itself, but what we interpret about it that causes that. So if I think my spouse doesn't care about me, well, that's going to create hurt feelings. If I'm thinking something like my spouse is so incorrigible and unreasonable, and he or she won't listen to me, then I might be frustrated or angry. If I am thinking, I don't get where they're coming from on this, that doesn't make any sense to me, then I'm going to feel confused. So the emotions result from what we think, not from the circumstance itself. Why is that important? Because otherwise we would blame, and sometimes we trip on this and do, we blame other people for what we feel. We even say it in our vernacular. We say things like, you make me so mad. Not true. We do a good job of it all by ourselves, making ourselves mad based on certain circumstances that are going on. I want to make that very clear. And then we need to talk about the difference in those two kinds of thinking. 45% of the day is very purposeful thought. 55% of the day is automated. How does that work? And why is it that automated thought is so different from one person to the next? Why is it that I think this way and my spouse thinks that way, so that we end up in a disagreement like we end up in? And how do we resolve it if we are seeing it differently? Well, let's look at that automated thought for a second so you can kind of get a sense of what is going on with it that creates that difference of perspective. To come full circle, why is it that I'm seeing red when you're seeing blue? Well, it comes down to this. This automated structure is known as a belief. We have oodles of these. They're filed neatly in a little filing cabinet in our brain. And every time you come across the associated situation, then we go down in that cabinet and grab the related lens or lenses and put them in our little view window, and we look through that to determine how we're going to think and then subsequently feel, and then you combine those two, and that's where you get behavior. So the beliefs are the things that do it. We'll take one as an example so you can kind of see. This box represents one belief or one lens in how we view the world around us. We'll use something that's really concrete, typical situation that we run into a lot, and this one's a moral belief. Actually, not all of our beliefs at all are moral, like right or wrong. I'll show you some in a minute that have to do with depression and anxiety that are not necessarily moral issues. But I'm going to use one that is moral on the board here. I hope this glare from the sun doesn't make it hard to see this, but we'll put this here. Stealing is wrong. Now, I am pretty sure that most or all of you in this audience would agree with that and believe that stealing is wrong. Well, where did you get that? You weren't born with it. Well, it comes from how we typically were brought up. So we have things we call evidence or evidences that create and then subsequently reinforce that belief. So maybe I was taught by my parents stealing was wrong, but then it gets reinforced if I don't believe them and go steal something. It gets reinforced if I see what happens to other people when they steal, or if I have been stolen from. That teaches me something. There are a lot of different ways that this gets reinforced. And it is out of there that my thoughts about it are going to pop up automatically in certain situations. So like when I go to Smith's, I grab a cart, and I go through and I put food and stuff in my cart, and I go up to the front and pay for it and leave, and I never think anything about it. That's just what you do. When I'm in Smith's and Granny in front of me is putting soup in her, cans of soup in her cart, I don't worry about that. It doesn't even register. It's like, there's soup in her cart. Not that exciting. But if I come around aisle 7 and there's a kid there and he's like shoving candy bars in his pocket, he doesn't see me. Now that's going to ping in my belief that stealing is wrong. I'm going to be concerned about that. I'm going to have thoughts like, hey, this kid can't do that. Then I got to have another belief that says, what do I do if somebody is not following this belief? And it's going to be probably something about how I would handle it with management, or if I'm going to take the kid on myself or go find his parents, or depends on whether the kid is like wearing a bunch of spikes and he's twice my size too, in terms of how I'm going to intervene. But those beliefs are going to be determining how I think automatically. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you people have had this occasion happen. It happened to me about a month ago. I went over to Smith's, put groceries in my cart, went through the self-checkout, paid for my stuff, and I get out to my car, and as I was unloading groceries, that's when I saw it. The kitty litter and the 12-pack of root beer in the undercarriage that I forgot to pay for. Well, what thought comes to your mind the second you see something you forgot to pay for when you're already out of the store to your car? It's going to pop in automatic. What is it? It's usually something like, oh, man, I got to get back in there. I got to pay for this. Some people have told me they have a fleeting thought of free root beer. But then they're like, I can't do that. Stealing is wrong. I have to go back in the store. And so they go back in and either pay for it or they just shove the card in there if they don't have time, whatever it may be. But we have those thoughts surface on their own automatically when we are in the situation in which the belief is live. So that's great when they're functional, but if this belief is screwed up, then we're going to have a problem. So let me walk you through one of those. In this situation, this is one I come across almost weekly when I'm dealing with people who have depression or anxiety. It's just extremely common. In fact, I have read that it is nationwide one of the 2 most common beliefs that there is in depression. And here it is. It is, I can't do anything right. Well, that's Not even possible. You cannot actually fail everything you do. In fact, if you failed everything you do, then you would succeed at it, which means that you just failed because you just succeeded at something. Figure that one out. So anyway, I can't do anything right. It's a superlative to be sure. It's not possible to fail everything that you do. I have some clients who have told me before, no, I'm telling you, Steve, it's true. I fail everything. I'm just a loser. So I'll mess with them a little bit. I'll tell them like, okay, let's see. Everything? You fail everything. Yeah. Telling you, I fail everything I do. So I will say, get your pants on okay today, or you put both legs down in one pant leg and try to get around the house that way. They're like, well, no, but that doesn't count. So then I'll say, okay, well, what about like driving over here to the appointment today? Did you get in like the passenger side and try to drive from over there? Well, no, but that doesn't count. Well, I can get them all the way to lunch without making any mistakes at all, but then they do something like, say, drop their sandwich or something, and they're all over it. They're like, see, I am a total failure. I can't do anything right because I dropped my sandwich. And the rest of the day went fine. This is not a rational belief. But how often is this belief going to be active? Well, like I said earlier, our brains will pull those out whenever you are in the associated situation. So how often in a given day do you do stuff? All day. Even if you're just sitting there, you're doing that. So that is going to rot in people's belief boxes or in their little lens holder all day long. And it's going to feed them all kinds of lines coming up out of those thoughts every time they try to do something. You can't do that. You're going to mess that one up. Oh, he's going to think you're the biggest loser. Oh, your boss is going to fire you any day. That's just going to happen because you just can't do anything right. Constantly. How would that not result in depression? If you are constantly berated with a barrage of negativity like that from another person, it will eventually drag you down. And if it's from yourself, it's all internal dialogue in there 24/7. It is no wonder people end up with depression with that kind of thinking. The other belief that's common, similar to this but on a different plane altogether, says, I am unlovable. If people do love me, something's wrong with them because I'm not lovable. And people literally do believe that. And it is false. Both of these beliefs are false. I can do many things well is a good replacement for that. I'm going to walk you through how to do this so that actually after watching this video, you have a very quick overview of what you can do with your own thinking. First, identify dysfunctional believing like this. This is bunk. It's not healthy. And it will create all kinds of anxiety and or depression. Those are just twin sisters anyway. They're almost always together. So let me show you a new belief and how to go about getting it. I'll take these feelings out just a minute so we have some space. So what we do is we go get a new belief. Now it needs to be well balanced. It's got to be something that doesn't hit the other end of the spectrum. Right now the pendulum can't get stuck any more to the wall of the clock than right here, but we don't want to swing it the other way and say, I do everything perfectly, I'm a total stallion. We want to say something like in the middle that's logical, like this. I can do many things well. Why would we say that? Because many isn't all, and well isn't perfect. So I can do many things, lots of stuff, really good. Well, do you know anyone on the planet who can't do that? I don't. And you know what? You don't either. Everyone can do many things well. This actually lets you totally botch some things. I haven't figured out why yet, but I'll never be in the NBA. I think it's shoe size. But it definitely doesn't have anything to do with being 5'4". Now, in terms of changing the belief box, what we want to look at is the same thing that creates the old one in the first place. The way to do it is based on looking for evidences. So we do this right here. That's the homework. We would tell a person if they have the old belief and they want this new one, that's not going to grow on its own. This one did from just casual, passive thought processes where we started to focus on just the negative because we see what we look for. So we start looking for the negative and we start to actually filter out all of the evidence that does not support this thinking, which is what? Everything I do well, I stop seeing. So all of my successes, I could be at work and the boss says in the morning, hey, Steve, could you write this report and get it turned in by the end of the day? If I was, let's say I was a news person, a reporter, and the boss said, write this report on Obamacare, get it posted by the end of the day. Immediately, with this belief, I'm going to think, oh, I'm going to so mess this up. I'm going to mess it up. I know I'm going to mess it up. And that could actually affect my performance. Well, if I sit down and start writing it, let's say that I finish the report by noon, and I take it into my boss and he says, this is awesome. This is exactly what we're looking for. Let's get this done. I want you to post it. First of all, there's some data that is incorrect here. Just get that fixed, but then post it. Thanks for doing it. It's awesome. Based on this lens right here, what am I going to hear in his critique? I will only hear the negative. The data is wrong. What I've had people tell me, that I've had to go digging to find out other information, they'll say things like, if we use this example, I would, if I had that belief, go home to the family and say, how was work today? Not good. Boss told me today, I wrote this report that he wanted me to do, and he got all over me about it. He said that there were mistakes in it all over the place. He said, your data's off. Might as well pack now. It's only a matter of time before I lose my job and we'll be homeless. I saw a good spot under the bridge over there, under the freeway on the way home, and that's where we're going to have to live now. That's how negativity can overtake us. We don't even hear all of the positive things the boss said because we're too busy focusing on what we can't do right. But the new thinking, we train ourselves to focus on things we do well. And guess what? The ground is littered with stuff that we do well every day. Totally littered with it. But we have to train ourselves to think that way. Let me show you what the brain will look like in this process. I'm going to draw an exact, let me make sure I've got a spot and put one right here. Okay, just go with it. That's supposed to be a brain, not a kidney. But in the brain, you have certain thought processes that take place. This isn't, of course, drawn to scale, but so you get an idea. This belief might be right here. From one neuron to the next, it gets run through. And every time you think that thought, then your brain actually vascularizes those neurons. Or in other words, pumps blood through there, strengthening the thought process. So pretty soon, you've got a nice, strong freeway system of thought. It's what we call a neural pathway. That neural pathway is just sort of like a regular thing that you just go to every single time. Now, I don't know the freeways up there in Idaho. You do have freeways, right? We have them here. But right here, if any of you are familiar with Utah County, I ask clients this all the time. If you needed to go up to Salt Lake right now, what route would you take? And they always say, I-15. And I say, okay. Freeway's closed. Now what route would you take? And every time they go, let's see. And that's where I cut them off. I tell them therein is the difference between automated thought that you are so routine used to doing that the brain is programmed to go there. You didn't have to think. I said, how would you get up to Salt Lake? I-15. Well, if you were just going to go to Salt Lake and nobody's asking you that question, you just go get on the freeway. You wouldn't think, I will now go get on the freeway. You just drive. You just go get on the freeway automatically. But now it's closed. There's a different pattern of thought. Now you have to actually work. You have to go, okay, my automatic pathway is closed. So what would I do? I guess I could go over the mountain. I could take the frontage road. I could drive out west and take Redwood around to Bangerter. That kind of thinking is now what you have to do. That is the difference between your normal route right here, a belief, and the new way I want to think I can do many things well. If I want a new perspective, I want to see the other side of the page. Instead of red, I want to understand there's blue. I have to work. I have to wake myself up to that other 55% of my thinking and allow for some other truth to be there. So if I'm looking for that, a more balanced way to think, that's over here. I have to chop through there. The brain's not going to like that, just so you know. The brain will look at it this way. Either I take a freeway, which is already paved and it's 6 lanes and it's beautifully striped and well lit, and I'm familiar with it. It's easy. Or I'm going that way and it's like facing the Amazon jungle and all I have is a machete. And I have to go hacking through the vines to get anywhere. And then if I want to still use that pathway, I got to do it again because overgrowth comes back. I have to do it enough, then I have a nice little animal trail like thing that I'm using enough. I have to widen it. Then I got to get one of those things to kind of grate the road. And then I got to lay down some sand and gravel. And then I've got to come through and pave it. And then I only have a 2-lane highway. I've got to widen it. It takes time to change our thinking, but it's worth it. Sorry. It's worth it. The work we do to stop giving in to what is easy. And typically, the automated tends to be negative because, like I said to you before, we are hardwired as human beings for negativity. So the hardwired automated stuff often goes towards the negative and the destructive and depressing. But as we work at on a regular basis to create new thinking, this eventually does take root. I'd say if you gave it 2 or 3 months of working really hard at looking for evidence to this, I can do many things well. I really can. Or another one, I'm enough. I'm not perfect, but I am enough. I'm a good person who's really trying. I make mistakes, but I'm heading in the right direction. That kind of effort every single day, give it 2 or 3 months and it starts to take root. And pretty soon, your automatic thinking comes up out of this belief. This one is still there, but it starts to kind of die out. It becomes easier for the brain as you get this new freeway system going. Then you can choose. Instead of having to really push yourself the other way, the brain will just, it's an easy choice to take either freeway, and the other one is more logical. It will gravitate there once it's paved. Overall, I guess what I'm saying is that it's important for us to strive towards what is real and what is positive, not just what's easy. Negativity is too easy. Just because something might be true does not mean we have to think about it all day long. Is COVID a thing? Yeah. I currently have it. But I don't have to worry about it and fear it all day long. I've got other things to focus on. Kids to raise, people to help, work to do, etc. There are things that we can focus on. Our Heavenly Father knows there are negative things in this world, but He does not hyper-focus on them. When you listen to President Nelson, how does it go? He is aware of the negative and frightening things in this world, and he'll speak of them. But he's so optimistic about the future, looking at the things that are also coexisting and positive. Brothers and sisters, well, this is Relief Society, but I hope brothers will also listen to this. It is my hope that you will do everything you can within your own mind to discipline yourself to do those things, not just mentally, but physically, doing the work to get yourself to think better. Focus on what's real, not just on what's easy. I testify to you that this is information that works. It really does change our thinking and can lead us in directions that will help us to be a whole lot happier than where we may be otherwise. Do the work. Think the thoughts that are real and positive and uplifting. Don't just be an expert in what you don't want. Be an expert in your own goals and what you want to achieve. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.